Gabatrix Minerva by C. Med. Prologue. As for life out in space, I cannot deny there is life out there. We must hope we find them first, or we are doomed when they find us. Gabatrix, 2261 AD. It is far into the future. Earth was abandoned. Mars became the center of mankind for hundreds of years. Billions died as Earth became uninhabitable. Things changed for the better when a pioneer named Gabatrix discovered folding space. Humanity's history changed for the better. New worlds were discovered, and life prospered for mankind. That was until the discovery of a sentient alien race, hostile and seemingly hell-bent on wiping out humanity. No one knows their attackers, and there seems no hope in stopping them. All is known is that the race identifies themselves as the Etrians. Chapter 1. February 3rd, 2349. It was cold and black in the emptiness of space, like a vast ocean of nothingness. Space was the definition of its very self. There was no sound. There was no heat except the sunlight that radiated from the star. Even in the Sol system, it was a long and lonely place, consisting of a size of almost 290 billion kilometers. The only life that seemed to shine came from the glowing G-type star in the vast distance. The 4.6 billion-year-old star continued to shine as it was in its midlife. Seemingly, it didn't seem to care about anything else. Described as a yellow dwarf, the Sol system did have its planets, though. Even though there was no sound in space, there was activity going on. If one could hear the sounds of the solar winds and the electromagnetic particles, they could listen to the sounds each of the planets made. Mercury, being the closest to the star, often sounded like a buzzing wind of darkness as the planet was being continually scorched by the sun. Venus sounded like someone blowing into a long, hollow tube as the dense atmosphere burned and crushed anything that flew into it. Earth sounded like a reverberating wind blowing even if the planet had seen better days. Mars sounded like a calm wind in a desert, even with the human activity that was present there. It was Jupiter, where the sounds were the most unique. Some would consider the sounds to be beautiful, while others might leave the room. The ambient music of Jupiter was the perfect source of mystery, where humanity still had much to discover. Being the largest planet in the solar system, it was like a solar system in itself. Even if it was only 1/10 the size of the Sun, the planet was 2.5 times larger than all the planets in the solar system combined. Consisting of mostly hydrogen, the world was very close to becoming a star itself. There was so much gas on Jupiter that it was consumed by it. Consisting of at least 2 cloud layers and more, the planet was defined by its color alone. Each zone consisted of a mixture of various colors, from white, red, orange, yellow, blends of those colors, and more. Of course, the most distinguishing feature was the noticeable great red spot that spun near the southern equator of the planet. Like a giant eye, it seemed to gaze at the other planets as if Jupiter itself was the master of the solar system. Perhaps it was. It is here that we make our trip closer to Jupiter. As we get close enough, we can see the numerous moons that orbited the gas giant. Being so massive, the planet captured everything around it and held it like it was a father taming his children. There were almost 80 moons and celestial objects that orbited this monstrosity of a planet. Io, Callisto, Ganymede, Himalaya, Sinope, Pasiphae, Carme, Leda. There were too many to list. Each moon seemed to tell its own tale as they all stared at the planet that they called their master. However, it was one particular moon that we focus our attention on. The moon that we get closer to is the smallest of the 4 moons discovered by the astronomer Galileo. Its orbit was between Io and Ganymede, and it was slightly smaller than the Earth's moon. It is here that we see Europa. Its orbital distance was about 670,000 kilometers from Jupiter, which was almost twice the distance between Earth and its orbiting moon, Luna. Even then, Jupiter took up a sizable chunk of the horizon when one stood on the surface of that moon. Europa itself was distinguishable for its surface. Consisting of a layer of ice on its surface, there appeared to be signs that it was seemingly assaulted. While there were very little craters on the surface, the moon was almost pasty white at first glance. When one looks closer, we can see what looks like orange lines that break the solid white color. The lines seemingly had no pattern in what direction they went or where they came from. The year was 2349 AD, as we finally see what looks like a small object that is orbiting Europa. While it measured to be about 250 meters in length, the object did not appear to be natural in occurrence. It looked to be artificially constructed. The starship consisted of a long grayish tube that connected to several modules. On the bow section, it consisted of a larger hangar bay. The bow also seemed to carry a series of launchers that connected near a large series of antennas. As you travel down the ship, you can see a series of vectoring thrusters to help the ship maintain orbit and direction. There were a couple of turreted guns that lined up to two doors that lined on both sides of the ship. As we proceed further to the center of the ship, we can see a description plate on the side of the hull. Written in both English and Chinese, the name UHN Tyson was written along with the registry number RS-28 underneath the name. The center of the ship consisted of an almost internal bridge on both the dorsal and ventral sides. On the dorsal section, top of the ship, was a large radar dish, possibly advanced scanning equipment for the time. On the ventral, the bottom, was another massive sensor array. On the starboard and port sides were 4 forward-mounted thrusters to help ensure that the vessel could stop or move in reverse. This would connect to more vectoring thrusters to help the ship move around. As we proceed to near the stern, aft, of the UHN Tyson, you can see 2 large rotating rings. There were no noticeable windows of any kind, but it seemed to be a place where the crew and staff worked. Both rings spun at the same speed. It almost tripled the height of the ship alone, but it seemed to be a necessity for whoever was living in it. The twin rotating rings seemed to be the highlight of the ship.